Okay, so we're on to our next topic, which is that of functions. And if I were to summarize what a function is, or the purpose of a function, we can think of it as a way to organize our code. Okay, so if we take the analogy of a toaster, we can give the toaster some inputs, which we will call parameters, and we will get back some output, which we will call a return. So in this case, the bread would be the input, and the toaster will return to us toasted bread, which is our return. Okay, so the toaster is our function. It does a specific task. Okay, so let's look at the different parts of a function. And like I mentioned previously, we have parameters, which again are the data that is needed. We have the return, which is the data that will be sent back from the function. And one thing to keep in mind, that there are some functions that don't have parameters and also don't have return values. Okay, now one thing that trips up beginning programmers is the difference between a parameter and an argument. Okay, and so as we progress through this lesson, we will see the clear difference. But for now, just think of it as parameters are sort of placeholders, and arguments are the actual real data that is passed in. Okay, so there's always the need to create a function. And to create a function, we need to specify a few parts. Okay, and so we need to specify a function name. We need to specify the name and type of the parameters. Again, the parameters are the inputs. And we need to specify the return type. Now keep in mind step 2, number 2 and number 3, they are optional. Okay, so there will be instances where a function does not have any parameters, and again, instances where the function does not return anything. Okay, good. Now, whenever a function does not return anything, we say the return type is void. Okay, so let's look at an example. Okay. So if I have this function down here, okay, the function name is the area of square. Okay, the name and type of the parameters are right here inside these parentheses. Okay, so the parameters always goes after the function name and inside parentheses. In this example, our function only has one parameter, but functions can have multiple parameters. They're all, if there are more than one parameter, there's more than one, we use a comma to separate them. Okay, so in this case, the one parameter is called length of side, and it is of type double. And finally, if there is a return type, then we need to specify that in front of the function name. In this case, we're saying this function will return an answer. It will return some data that will be of type double. Let's look at this example. Let's forget about the body for now. Okay, I want to focus on the actual function definition. Right? And so notice the function name, the return type, and the parameters, aka inputs. Okay, so it so happens that this function, and notice that the body of the function is between this open and close curly brace. Okay, so all the code that we put for our function must be in between these curly braces. So what does this function do? Well, this function will take this input, length of side, and it will multiply length of side by itself. In other words, it's squaring. And then it will provide the answer. It will save it into a variable called result. Okay, and then on the next line, it will return that result. Okay, it will return the answer to us. And so notice this function has a specific purpose, and that purpose is to find the area of a square, right? And obviously we know from high school math that to find the area of a square, it's length of side times length of side. All right, so this function, notice the name kind of gives me a hint as to what its purpose is. Just like how a toaster, its name tells me or gives me a hint as to what it does. It toasts things. Okay, so again, once we give this function a number, it will give us back that number squared, which represents a square, the area of a square. All right, so how do we use this function, or how do we call it? How do we utilize it? Well, it's quite straightforward. Okay, at the top here, all right, I'm going to write my function. Okay, and then underneath, okay, I'm going to have my main, and I am going to call the function, and I'm going to give it the number that I want it to use to find the area of the square. So this 2 represents the length of the side of the square. So if I give it this 2, it will say 2 times 2, which gives me 4, and then it will return 4. And that 4, so all of this, okay, all of this will evaluate to 4. And that 4 will be stored in the result variable. And that way, I will be able to print that 4. Okay, so obviously if I wanted, I could use the pow function, which allows me to use the power function. Okay, so in this case, I would have said length of side squared. All right, but we look at both versions. We look at the one where we implement the squaring ourselves, and we look at the one where we use the CMAT library. Going forward, whenever there's a chance to use a library, we'll use the library. Okay, great. So this is how we use a function. And again, this brings me to the important difference. The number, or the thing that I actually give the function, is called the argument. Okay, so notice this is a real number. It's a number that we know. Okay, it's concrete. So we call this the argument. Now compare that to here, where we're creating the function, and in the parenthesis, right? So notice in the parenthesis, right? We have double length of side. So whenever you say what the parameter name is, what this name is, and what the type is, collectively we call that the parameter. Okay, so if you think about it, we're telling the compiler that to expect for a single number to be sent to the function. And so the compiler will check. So when I pass in 2, the compiler will check, is 2 a double? Yes, it is. And then it will say, okay, I'm going to create a box called length of side, and I'll put 2 into it. And so inside the body, whenever I refer to length of side, the compiler knows that I'm actually referring to the real number 2. All right, so that's the difference between a parameter and an argument. Right? Again, I'm stressing it because many beginning programmers confuse the two. Right? When you say argument, they're not quite sure what you mean. When you say parameter, they're not quite sure. Again, arguments are the real data. The parameters are sort of the placeholders for that data. Great, so I'm going to leave this here, and I'll see you in the next lesson where we write some code to sort of make this more clear. I'll see you in that next lesson, that next video.